Anyway, so we're connecting to true power, and the theme today and the topic I want to focus on first is connecting to the power of hope. And when I think about that word hope, I reflect on back when I was went to college, went to school the first time, and was in business school. And one of the professors kept saying, "Hope is not a good business plan, right? If that's all you're basing your business on, it's not a good business plan." So that kind of gave me a look at the word hope as kind of being something that might be something we don't want to focus on. But in a mindful way, I think the power of hope really connects to that optimistic heart and all the stuff that rests in the heart. So that's really what the theme of what I want to talk about today is connecting to the true power that comes authentically from that place of hope, and how hope is, it's more than an emotion, it's an intention. But when hope is connected with intention and all the other stuff that we do, it makes us lean into that optimistic space, because hope leans into the belief that there is good in the world and that we do have good in our life, and that goodness is worth fighting for. But sometimes it takes practice, sometimes it takes some work to overcome the obstacles that we all face, because we know life is filled with all kinds of twists and turns, and these obstacles and adversities show up over and over and over again. But with practice and with hope, we don't lean into the belief system that life is unfair or that life is a burden. Um, there are unfavorable things that happen in our lives. Things don't always go as planned. And when we get out of that expectation that everything is always going to go as planned, we allow ourselves to connect to that intelligence that we know we don't always get what we want. And sometimes the world will rain on our picnic. I plan on going to the beach today, but today is raining, so I'm not going to be able to go to the beach. Or if I go to the beach, I'm going to get wet. But if I lean into the optimistic side and says it's the rain that makes everything thrive, or that's the way life goes, it's not the world out to get me. It's just a day that it's going to rain, right? I don't take it personally. So when we move into that space of hope, it helps us lean into being in that optimistic space more often than the pessimistic space, and understanding that even when things don't go as planned, it's okay. Even when everything doesn't fall out the way it should, life is still worth living and worth fighting for. So we have to accept life, and that's one of our biggest practices, is accepting the obstacles and the roadblocks and the negative stuff that comes up and the circumstances that are beyond our control, and the fact that oftentimes these things derail our best laid plans, right? But knowing that if we lean into hope, it takes so much of the suffering off, that life isn't straight sailing, but it's an adventure of valleys and peaks and victories and obstacles, joys and sorrows, happiness and pain. If we move into that space where we fear what could go wrong next, and all of us have done that at times, we place this unnecessary burden on our shoulders that we're dreading the worst. And we have that expectation. And then, well, that's the energy that we're putting out. So even if the worst doesn't happen, we pull ourselves into that negative space. But with practice and what we're doing in a practice of mindfulness and leaning into the compassion and the love and the forgiveness and the hope and all the stuff we practice, we adopt that heart that's optimistic, and we can breathe easier and be more resilient, even in those times that things aren't so pleasant. But we understand that tomorrow's a new day. So hope is what it takes. And again, hope is a word that sometimes I struggle with, but as a optimistic person, I've got high hopes. And that's a great song. I'm not going to sing it to you, but I got high hopes, right? So hope is more valuable than a lot of us give it credit for. And in a coaching session, if I look back over the years and all the coaching sessions, I don't think I've ever coached a client to say, let's focus on hope. No, we focus on the tools that we can use to move into that space of hope. But isn't that what we're doing? It's softening the burden of the unextinguishable flame, understanding that we are capable of overcoming every obstacle, and we've been through so much in our life. So hope is what it takes to connect to the fact that we can get through whatever struggle we're in. Hope is that place that we can settle into, even in the most dreaded moments of our life. So I kind of think now, as I've leaned into that practice of hope, that hope is really a wondrous gift because it keeps us going, even when we might want to quit, even when our ego gets in the way and says those messages that we shouldn't be listening to, right? But hope allows us to move into that space and say, I'm not going to quit, that there are new days ahead and new possibilities ahead. And that's what it's all about. Hope is the belief that things will work out, especially when it seems things won't work out, because it gives us that light to look forward to. So to lean into hope, it helps to stay calm. It's most important to be present in what's going on right now, because if we're so worried about tomorrow, it's difficult to lean into that space of hope. So we pull ourselves back into this space and say, right now, I can focus on being calm. Right now, I can move into that peaceful heart and connect to the light of hope that's there. And when I start breathing into that space and connecting to the truth that I will get through this, that I remember that I've made it through so much in my life. And when hope connects to that message of faith that I talked about in last week's Coach's Corner, when I lean into the faith that I have the power, that I am whole and complete, that I have all that I need to succeed, when I connect hope with that faith, then anything is possible. It helps us overcome the impossible. So when you team up that hope and faith and compassion and love, we see that we can get through anything. So faith in ourselves, faith in the universe, and faith in the love that exists all around us, that leads us to that place that there is hope. So in our practice, when we're working with our clients or focusing on ourselves, we know that when we're in a difficult space, in a space of grief, or a space where we lost our job, or we're in a bad relationship, or where something bad's happening, our emotions are amped up, right? But those emotions that we encounter in those times of suffering, they shouldn't identify us. We should be identified by that optimistic person that we usually are. So if you're in a job and your boss is telling you that we're going to downsize and your position is going to be terminated, or you're working with your kids and they get expelled from school, or your parents are in a place of not even being able to take care of themselves, or our doctor gives us some kind of a adverse health message, then our emotions become this roller coaster ride of super highs and super lows, and we're not at our best. But when we remember that message of hope, and when our thoughts start to gravitate towards that optimism that we are whole and complete and we have all that we need to succeed, it gives us that light to lean into instead of letting that darkness overcome. We can't expect life to be smooth sailing all the time, right? Those unexpected conditions that rise up and overwhelm us and test us and even cause us trauma, they test our true power. And that's what this is all about, is leaning into our power, the power of faith and the power of hope. Knowing that our emotions at times aren't indicative of our true power, but they are part of us. And in our practice of coming into the present, in our practice of radical acceptance, in that space where we see all these external things trying to push us out of that place of being composed and grounded in our truth, we know that what we practice grows stronger. And the more we connect to that light of hope, the more that light of hope helps us overcome those things that are put on us by our external environments, those things that get in the way of our peaceful way of being. Thich Nhat Hanh says, hope is important because it can make the present moment less difficult to bear. If we believe that tomorrow will be better, we can bear the hardship of today. I don't know what book that's from, but that's one of his quotes. And that's really, truly what we're leaning into. So hope is important because it can make the present moment less difficult to bear. And if we believe that tomorrow will be better, we can bear a hardship today. That's a practice. That's a practice that we have to lean into. That's a practice that we have to coach our clients to in that space of suffering, because we know when we work with others or we're focused on ourselves, a situation can be bleak. And in that bleak moment, we're invited to master a lesson, but we should see it as a lesson that might be of greater importance than we even expect. When things don't go our way, maybe they're not meant to go that way because there's something else this other way, right? That's where the hope is there, that this lesson is going to get me where I need to be. This hardship is going to make me stronger for tomorrow. If we lose our job, maybe there's something better out there for us. Maybe there's a transition that's there. Maybe in that moment after I lost my job, if I truly move away from that external thing and sit in the present, maybe I start to realize I actually loathed my job. I was in that space where I thought I was in a job that I loved, but when I got away from it, I'm like, man, I didn't realize how much I was suffering in that space. So then I have an opportunity to find a new path that led me to happiness. I could have been stuck in that space of suffering and woe is me. Maybe we can start our own business, our own practice, or become a life coach or a sound healer or whatever it is. When we take that step back, there are openings all around us. If we take off that, if we move ourselves out of that space of suffering, we can consider other things and see other opportunities. As I work with clients, a lot of times, one of the first things I teach them is when we sit in presence and we accept where we are and we become aware of all the circumstances in our life, it's almost as if we finally stopped and opened our eyes, because so many people are stuck with those blinders on. They're only looking at what's right in front of them, trying to get through the day, trying to make it from Monday to Friday, trying to get through whatever it is I need to get through. And they're missing all of these opportunities that are out here because they're only looking right there. Well, hope gives us that opportunity, and we breathe into it and say, okay, I am present. And yes, that was a horrible situation and I am suffering, but let me be present. Let me accept it. Let me be aware of how it's making me feel. And when you meditate that on that for a few minutes and you open your eyes, maybe all of a sudden you see a different path. I don't know. Sometimes that takes practice and it doesn't work right away. But when we can start recognizing that assuredly there is something to learn from this, that there's a lesson or some kind of inner growth that's contained within that circumstance, even if we can't see it yet, eventually we will. There's a path that's meant to be seen. So a big piece of what we're practicing is working on getting out of this ego space. And the ego mind really doesn't like not knowing, right? It doesn't like change. So feeling hope is a way of moving out of that ego space, of avoiding the discomfort of uncertainty and moving into the space of acceptance radically. With hope, we move into that radical space. So if we're not leaning into hope and we're stuck in that space of woe is me, then we can't envision a positive future, right? Without any hope, how can we see past this boulder that's standing in front of us, blocking our way? But when we realize leaning into hope, maybe I can go around that boulder, or I can dig under it, or maybe I have to climb over the top, or maybe I just need to chip away at it with my little chisel and just keep chipping, chipping, chipping. And it might take me a while to get through it, but guess what? There's light on the other side, and there's a path waiting for me. That's what hope leads me to. That's that space that lights my heart and says, you know what? I will get through that. So if we dwell on the circumstances and wish everything was better, we're moving ourselves out of power, our own power. We're letting the power of the circumstances take hold. When we move into empowering practice, like we are working on empowering ourselves and empowering the people we work with, we want to hold ourselves in that mind space that says, I will survive, that we are present. And yes, I am an emotional being, and it's okay to cry. It's okay to get angry. It's okay to feel, but don't let that overwhelm you. Let it come up so you can deal with it. And remember, even in the midst of that sadness, even in the midst of everything that you're suffering through, if you lean into that heart space, the light of hope is still there. the light that says you will get through this. How many times we read these books, these self-help books that say we're going to fix our emotions or resist that emotion, right? That's the opposite of what we should be doing. We should lean into those emotions because they're there for a reason. There's a lesson in that emotion. There's a feeling that we need to, again, I talk about sound all the time. It's a vibration, and an emotion is a vibration that needs to be resolved, because if we don't resolve it, we store it as unresolved energy, and it shows up as suffering and pain and discomfort and dis-ease, right? And when we hold on to that, that's what we attract more of, because we're like a magnet. So if we're holding on to that unresolved energy and those negative emotions, they start to show up more and more in the most inopportune times. And they put us back into that space where we only can see what's in front of us, the emotion I'm suffering right now. But with practice, we move into that space and understand an emotion is an emotion, but it's not permanent. A feeling is real, but it doesn't define us any more than my thumb defines who I am. That feeling of sadness shouldn't define who I am. It's part of me, and I accept the reality of it, but guess what? It ain't me, right? So, with hope, we lean into that practice and that message of manifestation that the universe reflects what we put out. So, what am I putting out? At this moment, what am I putting out? So if I entertain negative thoughts that are related to being able to not pay my bills, or that suffering that I feel when I'm not going to ever see that person I loved again, or I see all these messages from the media that says, I need this thing in order to be happy. If I put that out, I'm putting out that energy of need, right? That suffering is going to continue, because that's what the energy of the universe is going to give me back. But if I put out that message of hope, if I lean into the light that exists in my heart, that's what the universe is going to give me back. It's going to give me more things to be hopeful for, right? So if I'm aware and I recognize the signs that my thoughts are out of alignment, or I'm recognizing this emotion is stuck with something that happened in the past, then I can deal with it in the present, right? So what does that have to do right now with me? What lesson can I bring into this moment and connect to that message of hope that's going to help me get over or around or under that boulder? What can I do? Let it come up and then deal with it. That's a Thich Nhat Hanh message that says we don't resist it, we let it come up. And when we let it come up and we practice breathing and letting all those thoughts just slow down, and we open our eyes and see the reality of this moment, my heart is beating and it's telling me there's more. There's more goodness, there's more light, there's more compassion and love to give. So science now shows that when we change the perspective and we focus on different aspects of the situation that we're in, we can truly change the impact of it, right? That message that says, yes, I was dealt this deck of cards, but it's what I do with that deck of cards that makes a difference, right? That message that says, those twin boys that were born to an alcoholic father, and one of the boys never touches a drop of alcohol, and when asked, he says, look at my father. And the other boy becomes a raging alcoholic, and when asked, he says, look at my father. Same circumstances, but different choices. And when we lean into that place and say, I have a choice, and yes, I was dealt this deck of cards, but I am in control. It is my power, not my dad's power, not my grandparents' power. It's my power, and we take that power back. And that can have a beneficial impact on our life, because we're putting out the positive light, and the universe is going to give us more back. That's how it works. That's the power of manifestation. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we see our future developing? If I put myself in that place of doom and gloom and say, okay, wow, I have nothing left to live for, then guess what's going to show up? Or if I move myself into that space and say, there is more life to live, that there are things I can do with my life that will bring me back into that place of being the light. If we close our eyes for a moment and we visualize an optimistic path, it's like we flipped that switch in our mind. I can see that I will overcome this. I can see that there is a lesson to be learned from this. I can see that there is more love to be shared in my life. whatever that is, whatever that message is, what we tell ourselves becomes our reality, because again, that's the message that we're putting out. But it requires work. It requires practice, because what you practice grows stronger. And it requires intention, which was the first message that I talked about a couple of weeks ago. The power of intention is the power of everything, because what our intentions are shape our future. What I'm choosing to do today is shaping my tomorrow, one step at a time, one day at a time. But if we don't practice, leaning into this space, then guess what? This takes over. The ego mind will grab hold and put us in that space. And that mind, as I often say, will take us on all these different paths and justify every one of them and say, this is the reality of where you should be. But if we listen to our heart will not steer us astray. But we have to practice going into that heart space, because how do we know if the message is coming from our heart or our ego unless we practice going into that heart space? Because again, the mind can override so many different things and tell you, this is the message from your heart. But if you don't pause and breathe into it and feel that warmth and feel that love and feel that openness that comes when you really are coming from that heart space, then suddenly you're on the wrong path. So it requires discipline. It requires practice, and it requires envisioning a future that is bright, even if that future is just tomorrow. Opening our eyes and saying, tomorrow will be a better day. And if it's not, we open our eyes and say, tomorrow will be a better day, and take it one step at a time. It takes practice. We know when we sit in reflection that the world is filled with people that have overcome incredible hurdles, super incredible failures in their life, deep pain. But we see those people who have overcome it, and they're living successful, happy lives because they have overcome something, right? We all can kind of feel that at times. We've all overcome some trauma in our life, and we should feel good about that. But when you practice focusing on the power you have to overcome, and the power we have in the heart, and being present and being aware, and that space of radical acceptance, we stop being so attached to the outcomes, because we appreciate that everything's not going to go as planned. That's the reality. I can put everything in my path and spend all the right money and set myself up for success. But guess what? The universe is going to challenge me every now and then, quite often actually. But when we believe that when one door closes and another one opens at the right time, when we're ready, maybe that door's not ready to open because I haven't learned the message I need to learn yet. So what is that message? Dang you, universe. What is that message, right? Lean into it and listen to the heart. And when we allow ourselves to weave this mysterious path of detaching from the outcomes and just being in the reality of where we are, my friend Sam can tell you, when you live in the reality of where you are, you start to see all the love that surrounds you, even in the midst of the struggles that you're going through. Even in that message that says, I don't want to be here, when you open your eyes and say, where else would I want to be? I want to be here, right? So what appears detrimental at first may simply be laying the groundwork for this beautiful future from which you're building the foundation from the ground up. Something great is going to come out of this struggle. And that greatness might not be anything what you think it's going to be. And most of the time it's not. But that greatness, if you're paying attention, probably has nothing to do with material things and has more to do with the heartfelt things that the universe is sharing with you. Those moments of opening your eyes and seeing the beauty in nature, or the sunrise, or the look in the eyes of somebody you love, and realize I've been with this person for 15 years, and when's the last time I stared in their eyes and saw that energy, right? Pausing and realizing all the love that exists around you. So that's moving you into the space of moving from the heart space. So when we commit to a life of optimism, and not unrealistic optimism, I don't want to say pull the wool over your eyes and say, I'm going to go skipping through the forest when it's storming outside, although Sam might do that. I don't know. But we face the reality of it. When things are tough and when times are tough, we have high hopes. We can be confident in our willingness to see life from all the different viewpoints that come our way. So the next time something doesn't go as planned, we can lean into that hope and tell ourselves, I will be okay. I trust that life will get me where I need to go. I understand that there are chances to open myself up to see the light. To understand that when we connect to that hope and the intention and the love that we have in our life, we understand that those things will get us through anything. When we focus on the fact that we have love in our life in so many different ways, and that love has been there all of our life. And sometimes it might be difficult to see it, but it showed up as a teacher who was there for you, or that person who inspired you, or that author who wrote this book that moved you to change your life, or that family member who reached out to you when nobody else would listen. Those messages that are there that we tend to overlook because we were stuck in that place of suffering, we can start to see that that love is always there for us, even if it's just in the sunrise, or that bird that is singing to me at this very moment, or the way the waves are flowing in the beach, or the fact that a group of people showed up to listen to my message today. That's a message of love, right? We are here to support each other. So the next time something doesn't go as planned, you remember that. And I reflect on that and say, okay, not today, mister. I'm going to get through this. So hope will get us through anything. But first, we have to create the circumstances from which we can flourish in that place of hope. We have to practice connecting to gratitude. We have to connect this practicing gratitude, because if we don't have a foundation of gratitude for all that we have, we're not setting ourselves up to flourish. If we don't practice the compassion that we have in our heart, we're stuck in that angry space. If we don't practice forgiveness, we're stuck in that place of blame. We take responsibility and we empower ourselves, and we empower ourselves to focus on what it is we have and what the gifts we have to share. Then we have set ourselves up to be surrounded by the circumstances from which we can flourish. And that sets the world alight for us. That is the light that we're searching for in the darkness, and it's right here within us all. So the power of hope can move us out of that space where we see ourselves as a victim or a survivor, and move us into that space where we see ourselves as a survivor. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. And if I could find a way to package and dispense hope, I'd write a prescription for everybody. I want everybody to be addicted to that, because hope is the most powerful antidepressant that there is in the universe, right? That power of hope that allows us to see the light in the midst of the darkness. It really is sometimes that little sliver of hope that allows us to look past the abyss, look through that darkness, that allows us to reach for the moon instead of sinking into the depths of despair. As long as somebody I'm working with, an individual or somebody who's in that space of suffering, has hope, I can tell you that they can recover from anything, that they can overcome everything, as long as that hope exists. And when we coach our clients, when we coach ourselves, when we work with our family and our friends and realize that hope makes a difference, we can see that that light is there. Because if they lose hope, all is lost. If people lose hope, how do you wake up in the morning, right? How do you spring from that heart space and not that brain space if you're not leaning into the light of hope? Because the brain space, the woe is me, and that space of blame and anger and hate and fear is going to take hold, because that's what you're going to be practicing more without hope. But you know what? Hope lays dormant, even in those moments of deep despair. Even if it's been months, weeks, years, hope is still there. All of the intentions of our heart are still there. They just need to be nurtured. We just need to find the way to connect to them. Get out of the headspace. When we beckon the strength to lean into that hope and understand that we will overcome and we will persevere and we will endure, then all of a sudden you feel that shift, and I'm sitting up here instead of here. I'm here instead of here. It's a huge shift. So hope is the belief, again, that everything will work out. That instead of wishing for the better, I believe that things will be better, because wishing isn't the right thing. I believe it. And when I envision it, I can see it. So hope is a belief. It's not it's not coming from a place of want or need. It's something that we have to believe. So it's a belief that age 55, I can overcome whatever disaster comes my way. If I lost my home, or I lost my car, or I lost my job, or lost all of my possessions, I have the hope that I'll get through it. I have the knowledge that I have the support of so many people around me, and that I have the energy and the strength of my heart, that everything that I have will show up. Even in that space of great loss, I know I still have my health. I know I still have my family, the family I was born with and the family that I've chosen to surround myself with. Maybe I have to start over. But that steadfast determination can lead us into that space, even when we've been diagnosed with the most devastating diagnosis. But we know if somebody, for instance, is diagnosed with cancer, it makes a huge difference if they practice the positivity and the hope and the belief that tomorrow I will be okay, or they move into the space of doom and gloom. It makes a huge difference in how they, even if it's just live out the rest of their days in that space of positivity, that eventually maybe a cure will come, that something's going to happen and I'll be better. Not putting the blinders on and not living in the reality, but leaning into that space of light. So when we fight for our survival and we want to empower our clients to move into that space of survival, we need to lean into that space of hope, and not just surface hope, but deep down hope. It's that hope that makes champions. It's that hope that allows people to come over the most bleakest of times. So when I lean into that space, when I look at all I have to do, even in the midst of this wonky world that we live in, I got high hopes. I got high hopes that tomorrow is going to be a better day for us all. When I sit across from a client in that deep despair, I put out that energy of hope. I put this bubble over them and say, take some of my hope, take some of my light. What can I do to help you see that light and overcome whatever you're going through? Isn't that what we're all here for? Is to help empower people to move into that space, to lean into that space of love. And if that's all I talk about with them is recognizing how much love you have in your life, will love connect you to the hope. So if you think about all the people in your life, the family, the friends, if you make a point to connect with each and every person who's inspired you, who has loved you or taught you or shared something with you, that's going to ignite that spark of hope, even in the midst of despair. The most accomplished people move into that space where we realize that hope is part of our life. Again, it's not a great business plan. I'm not going to open this new meditation studio and hope that people walk through the door. It doesn't work that way. You have to do the work and put out the energy, and then people will show up, right? So when we're going through tough times, when we're in that space of stress or pain, when we have doubts, and we will have doubts, look, I talked about the faith in ourselves and the faith in the universe and faith in love, but sometimes we have doubts. And I think we should question that faith. And when we question that faith, we can open our book and say, why do I have faith in myself? And take inventory, become aware. Why do I have faith in the universe when day after day, day after day, I turn on the news and the universe is showing me something different than that light? And I realize, you know what? That's just the news. Look outside, look around you, right? Moving into that space of truth. So when we're going through that place of struggle, when we have those doubts, we breathe in, say, this too shall pass. And then we have hope. And often, hope is all we need. Maybe today, that little bit of hope is what I need to get through today. I got high hopes. So that's my message of hope.